What am I mad about today? I'm mad that the college football playoff is expanding to 12 teams, and TCU just showed you we only need 4.
Georgia stays king of the college football world. Is Kirby Smart on his way to becoming the greatest of all time? And a look ahead to the 2023 football season. We are hitting it all on this episode of College Football Today. Thank you for joining us. I'm Grace Remington with Coach Carl Reed. A quick note before we begin. This show is regularly on Monday and Wednesday. A little scheduling change here with the national championship. But Carl, Georgia beats TCU in the title game 65-7, and honestly, it wasn't even as close as that score shows.
They showed you it was levels to it. Georgia's at a completely different level in terms of a football program. Not much competition out there for the Bulldogs now outside of a handful of teams. And TCU, great season, but you came up short.
Right, and we established yesterday, if you ain't first,
you're last.
You're last. Yeah, Georgia finishes the season with just about every superlative in the book. A perfect 15-0 record, back-to-back champs for the first time in school history, and the first team to do so in the college football playoff era. So let's bring in our team site expert, Rusty Mansell, who is on site in LA. Rusty, glad you could join us today. You've covered 2 of these things now. What stood out to you the most about last night?
I think when you look, I heard Carl talk a little bit about this. When I saw TCU walk in media day on Saturday, and I saw Georgia walk in, I was like, wait a minute, this is going to take a dynamic game from their quarterback to offset what I'm looking at, because Georgia's so much bigger at every position. And then you see it in person last night. It was pretty much over. Had a busted coverage for 60 yards. That game was never, ever in doubt. Georgia just completely manhandled TCU. 2 different rosters, in my opinion. I think Carl will probably agree with me.
Yeah, absolutely, Rusty. When I look at it, you just talk about the talent disparity that you talked about. So when you saw those guys come in there on media day, did you think that it was any way other than the quarterback position that TCU could have done anything effectively? Other than the one play, like you just said, it didn't seem like TCU could get anything going. It seemed like Georgia was playing at times with 15 guys on the field at once.
Exactly. And here's the formula. For the last 3 years, Georgia's lost 2 games now. They lost to Florida in 2020 and Alabama in 2021. What's been the common factor? Elite quarterback play with elite wide receivers. Well, I knew that TCU had a wide receiver in Quentin Johnston who had 1 catch for 3 yards last night. He still might be the number 1 wide receiver taken. And when you see him in person, he certainly looks like an NFL first rounder, but he did absolutely nothing last night. So you take those factors in, and I looked at them, 4 wides, things like that. Ohio State gave Georgia fits. You know why? Because they had dudes. They had 4 wide receivers that could go. And they had C.J. Stroud, who played out of his mind, who is a NFL first rounder. So, I looked at TCU last night. I thought, man, they're going to have to do some really special things. And Georgia was going to have some turnovers. They're going to have a couple of pick sixes like they used to beat Michigan, some things like that. I just didn't think they were going to line up and go toe-to-toe with Georgia and win that game. And I predicted it 38-17. Almost went 41-10, but it wouldn't even have been close. I mean, it was 65-7. I think I heard this morning that's the biggest, most lopsided game in bowl football history, not just a national championship. So when you look at a complete dominance, this is going to be an off season with 2 topics. And what's going to happen when we go to 12 teams? Are we going to have games like this? And then can Georgia go back to back to back? Because what Kirby Smart has built, and I'm going to tell you right now, I've said it 100 times yesterday in different interviews, that was not their best team. And I don't know how it's going to play out next year, but 1 through 85, Georgia's roster next year, they're going to be better.
Well, Rusty, you kind of brought it up, the way Kirby has built this team. He's 47 at this point with 2 national titles under his belt in coaching 7 seasons at his alma mater. Nick Saban has 7. When he won his first national championship, he was 53. So Kirby Smart already has a head start on him. And then you look at this Georgia Bulldogs team since the year 2017. They are 72-10 with 2 national titles, 3 SEC titles, 5 SEC East division crown. So, in other words, Kirby Smart is dominating college football in the way that Saban just did for the last decade. What do you think it's going to take for Kirby Smart to pass Nick Saban as the greatest of all time?
I don't know that that's really. I just heard Kirby basically talk about that subject just downstairs a few minutes ago. We had his last press conference, and he said, "Look, I don't want my career, and I don't want this program, and I don't want these kids to be defined by championships. That's the goal here." He said, "But really graduating these kids, letting them become fathers, being successful men." He goes, "That's why I'm doing this." He goes, and he had a great point. There's been a lot of great coaches that didn't get to win one of these things, so." I looked a little deeper into that. Like, is Kirby Smart trying to race to win championships? I don't think he is. I just think he's trying to be the best he can every season. If it winds up being a championship, that's what it is. But, the Nick Saban stuff right now, what they've done in Alabama, I think Georgia still has a long way to go before they start talking about that. But I think if you're talking about in the now, what is going on right now, what Georgia has done in his first 7 years, and I think about the first press conference, and Kirby Smart had been in Alabama, obviously. In his very first press conference, he goes, "We got to get bigger on both sides of the ball. We got to get large humans." And when you look at Georgia, I've covered this team now for 13 years. When you look at Georgia walk into a room now, it's one of those like, where are they finding people like this? You look at Darnell. I took a picture on Twitter the other day. Darnell Washington at 6'7.5", standing beside of Marius Mims, who's 6'6.5". That's a tight end and a tackle, and their whole room looks like that. So what Georgia's building right now, they're going to make a run, continue to make a run. But as far as chasing Nick Saban in Alabama, not sure that's kind of his end goal right now. And I tell you now, those first 7 years on Kirby, he's been through that presidency kind of look. He's put some age on this thing. So, look, it's demanding. Carl knows this is such a demanding job now on these coaches. And Kirby just said he's going to spend home thinking about next year and a couple of things he can do in the offseason to get this team even better.
Yeah, you talk about the size, just the different caliber of athlete. And for all the 5 stars on the roster, we know it was a walk-on who brought Georgia to where they are today, and that's Stetson Bennett. And you also look at, the head coaching legacy of Kirby Smart and now the legacy of Stetson Bennett. They'll always be tied together because, ironically, it was a walk-on quarterback who got Smart to open up his offense. Rusty, you mentioned Kirby's time at Alabama, what he learned from Nick Saban. Obviously, that's a run the ball and play stout defense approach. But in 2020, Kirby had to change things up. He had to go find a quarterback and some playmaking wide receivers, and he brought over Todd Monken, who called an excellent game last night. And Smart, he said it himself in the post-game presser, Stetson Bennett is the greatest dog of all time. So where do you see Bennett standing in the all-time list of Georgia greats?
I see Stetson Bennett is going to be one of those guys that never pays for a meal wherever he goes in the state of Georgia. Even when he's 50 years old, he's sitting there with his grandkids. He's going to be the guy in the restaurant that somebody comes over and takes a picture with, asks for an autograph. He is an absolute living legend in this state. What makes it so different is he grew up. You see the pictures of his dad holding him at like 2009 Georgia-Florida game. You look at all those things, and this kid's a lifelong dream. And I go back, I've heard him interviewed before, in August of 2021, when they named Jawan Mathis, the quarterback that or 20, they told Stetson, "Look, you're not getting reps right now." I mean, he went to 4th string basically. So you get this guy that he starts that game, Jawan Mathis starts that game against Arkansas, kind of stalls out. They make the decision to go with Stetson Bennett. At that moment, he leads them back to beat Arkansas. And next thing you know, man, Georgia, they found something. He continued to grow. He wasn't perfect. I think Stetson Bennett continued to get better. But I tell you what, the last 2 games, specifically that 4th quarter against Ohio State, where he went 12 for 14 for 203, and he made 2 throws on that last drive, a tight window throw to Brock Bowers and a ball against cover 2, that whole shot Carl knows about, when he threw it between the safety and the corner for Kearis Jackson. Those are things that tell you he's seeing the game and he's got guts and he's got the arm delivered. I'm interested how he does it, what kind of shot he gets in the NFL. But I know one thing, Stetson Bennett it was a no-show this morning for his last press conference ever at the University of Georgia. So I know he enjoyed it last night.
And he deserves
my man
all the
Mike
fun
dropped the
in world.
press conference,
Hey,
awesome.
Rusty, Stetson Bennett is a guy that when you think about what he's done at Georgia, he's got to be a guy that's money is no good anywhere in the state. He should be able to be a part of any business, get any job, he could start a car dealership. If the NFL doesn't work out for him, he's going down as one of the most legendary dogs. He may not be the best player from a talent standpoint, but the ultimate winner, what college football is all about. Stetson Bennett is legendary in college football. He's etched his name in stone.
It's such a good story. No matter who you're a fan of, you root for those type of guys. A walk on, and come out of nowhere. Look, I'm guilty as everybody. I worked Stetson Bennett out. I worked him out at Lowndes High School down in Valdosta in January of 2015. You know what my note said? Live arm, small. And I never in my million years thought this guy was going to bring back-to-back national championships. I thought he'd never make it to Georgia. He was basically committed to Mercer when Georgia came in and talked him into preferred walk-on at that time. So you look at that, how many times he's taken chances, how many times he's been told no. Stetson Bennett bet on himself over and over and over. He won that locker room. He won that staff. And what he did last night, absolute legendary for Georgia Bulldogs.
It was so cool to see him get that curtain call in the fourth quarter, too. Not a typical thing that you see in college football, especially from a guy like Kirby Smart. But you saw Smart getting a little bit emotional, at least on the TV broadcast when he was talking about Bennett. All right, Rusty, I hope you make it to all the pressers. I know it's a fun time out there. We appreciate you joining us today. And for all the Georgia coverage throughout the offseason as they go for the three-peat, make sure you are tuned into dogs247.com.
With the college football season in the rearview mirror, what are some of the biggest storylines heading into the 2023 campaign? Well, some historic feats are in play. Georgia has a chance to become the first team to three-peat since the Minnesota Golden Gophers pulled it off in the 1930s. Caleb Williams looks to become the first repeat Heisman Trophy winner since Archie Griffin nearly half a century ago, and figures to be even better in his third year under Lincoln Riley and second season at USC. The most fascinating quarterback situation will be in Austin, Texas. Quinn Ewers enters his redshirt sophomore season with lofty expectations, but he'll be sharing a quarterback room with perhaps the most hyped recruit in recent memory, five-star Arch Manning. Arch is part of arguably the most touted freshman class of quarterbacks we've seen in years. But who will see the field first between Nico Iamaleava at Tennessee, Dante Moore at UCLA, Malachi Nelson at USC, Jackson Arnold at Oklahoma, and Jaden Rashada at Florida? There's plenty to look out for on the coaching side as well. Can Nick Saban return the Crimson Tide to the college football mountaintop? Will Jim Harbaugh leave Michigan for the NFL? What will the Deion Sanders era look like in Boulder, Colorado? Can Lincoln Riley help USC overcome their shortcomings on defense? Is Dabo willing to change his stance on the transfer portal? Will Matt Rule revive a Nebraska program that has been stuck in the mud? Storylines abound with an offseason full of speculation and player movement. Let the countdown to the 2023 season begin.
With the national championship being the conclusion of the college football season, it's time for us to turn the page to the 2023 season. I'm joined here now by my guys, college football analysts at 24/7 Sports, Brandon Marcello and Brad Crawford. How you guys doing?
Not as good as you, Carl. You said TCU was going to hit Georgia and down would go Frazier. It's more like Mike Tyson taking a bite out of Vander Holyfield. TCU took a little bit too much more than they could chew.
Now, I'm gonna tell you what. I'm gonna blame it on Michigan. Michigan made me believe that TCU had a chance, and what it shows me is how big of a gap is it between the best team in the SEC and the best team in the Big Ten. And so, as we turn to this, let's talk about our two early top 25. Let's bring that in right off the rip. And what I want to ask you, I'm going to start with you, Brandon, because you jumped right into it. Tell me which team has the best chance next year of dethroning the Georgia Bulldogs.
I'm going to say Florida State. They've been killing it in the transfer portal the last several years. They're killing it right now. And not just because of quantity, but because of quality. Their average rating of players, 91.4 right now, which is number 1 in the country. And then you've got quarterback Jordan Travis returning, who is going to be a Heisman candidate next season, was prolific this past year, was the number 1 quarterback with the number 1 offense in the ACC based off of passer rating. Not Drake May at North Carolina, not DJ Uiagalelei at Clemson, Jordan Travis. And that defense is improving. I really like Florida State to win the ACC. I like them to get to the playoff and bust through that ceiling and challenge for a national championship.
Yeah, Brandon's going quarterback heavy in the ACC with Jordan Travis. I'm going Penn State in this spot. A team that plays a similar, extremely physical brand of football as Georgia, coming off an 11-win season under James Franklin. I know some are going to ask, why not Michigan here? But we've already seen what Michigan can do against Georgia. It lost 34-11 last season in the playoff. Look, I watched Penn State this season go to Jordan-Hare Stadium in the SEC, destroy Auburn with 2 freshman running backs and that blue-collar mindset that Franklin has instilled at Penn State. That was a street fight. That's what it takes to beat a elite team like Georgia coming off back-to-back national titles. And I think this offense for Penn State can go next level in 2023 with Drew Allar at quarterback. The major assumption here is he's going to be that 5-star difference maker that Sean Clifford has not been the last couple of years. So Brandon likes Florida State as a team that can dethrone Georgia. I like the other state, Penn State.
I'm going to go back and I'm going to go old school a little bit. I think the only team that can do it is Alabama. I think that Alabama is the only team that's constructed in a similar way and that even has the courage when you get out there to play against a team like the University of Georgia. What I saw from TCU last night, a lot of business decisions, a lot of guys who got on that stage and didn't want to be going against the monster that is the University of Georgia. I think that Alabama is the team that contends with them. I don't see anybody in the SEC East stopping Georgia from being back in that game. One of the only hopes for Georgia to not be in this position again is if Alabama can handle them in the SEC championship game. And you could even still see 2 SEC teams again in the SEC championship. So even if Georgia lost the SEC championship next year, you could still see them in a playoff bid. I just think right now their program is at a place that very few teams could even reach them.
Yeah, man, listen, Alabama, we just kind of want to safely assume that they're going to be back. And listen, Nick Saban before the season was just lauding Bryce Young and Will Anderson as the 2 best players he's ever had, and he had them at the same time. Alabama underperformed. They disappointed with Bryce Young in the era as quarterback there. They didn't win a national championship with a Heisman Trophy winner. So all of a sudden we're going to turn to maybe Jalen Milroe as the quarterback, who was not very impressive this season when he was in spot duty, was more of a running quarterback. And we don't quite know what they're going to be able to do as an edge rushing team on defense. Yes, they got 5 stars and 4 stars everywhere. We were throwing these guys in the fire once again and counting on them to all of a sudden be able to get back in the SEC championship game. Give Nick Saban the benefit of the doubt, but man, they're losing their best players, and it's easy to put them at number 2. Heck, I put them at number 2 on my ballot just because who else are you going to put there? But I don't see them challenging Georgia. In fact, I think the best team that's equipped to maybe challenge Georgia is LSU. We saw what they did in the SEC championship game, being able to throw the ball against them. And talking to the LSU staff here this offseason, man, they are really geared up going into 23.
Yeah, I think Ty Simpson, Bama's third-team quarterback this season, might actually outplay Jalen Milroe during the spring. You know Nick Saban's not going to announce a starter after spring practice to, succeed Bryce Young. He wants to keep both those guys on roster and not enter that May portal. But like you said, Brandon, quarterback's a major issue at Bama right now. Crimson Tide were one of the most undisciplined teams as well this season. Without Bryce Young, it's probably an 8-4 team. So Alabama's a team that I put number 3 in my personal ballot behind Michigan and Georgia, but LSU might be the team that is the SEC's biggest threat to Georgia this season.
Brad, I'm going to start with you here. Who is a team that could crash the playoffs that we're not thinking about? Outside the box thought here.
Yeah, this isn't too outside the box, but it sort of feels like cheating taking USC here, but the Trojans are probably going to be outside the top 5. There's probably going to be some voters that have them in the 9-10 range. But look, this team was one win away, from beating Utah in the Pac-12 championship game and getting to the playoff in Lincoln Riley's first season. You bring back the best player in the country, arguably, in Caleb Williams, the Heisman winner. And now USC gets to have that sort of hungry mentality that we've seen, Bama use over the years after big losses. After they lost to Tulane in the Cotton Bowl, that was a major loss for Lincoln Riley.
That's my thing with USC. They play soft. They're soft. Are you going to toughen up? Are they going to toughen up on defense? Alex Grinch's defenses at OU and USC is what held them back. That's why they were 0-4 in the playoff at OU, and that's why USC lost the Pac-12 championship game and in the regular season to Utah. They were soft. They got to toughen up. They got to change something in that strength program, the way they handle things in the offseason there, and maybe even change the defensive coordinator there, Alex Grinch. I'm interested to see what happens at USC this offseason. Until they show me that they are willing to play tough and get their hands in the mud and fight, I just don't see USC as a playoff team and being able to contend for a national championship, even with a Heisman winner like Caleb Williams.
So, Brandon, who is your
dog? Too. I mean, you're probably looking at, 4 preseason top 15 teams with, Washington, Oregon, maybe Oregon State with Uiagalelei being in there too. So it's a tough league. But if you're giving me a dark horse, and we can use that term now, I mean, I like the best player in the country, Caleb Williams. He's going to have another, 40 touchdown, 4,000-yard season.
So, Brandon, you don't like USC there as his dark horse. Who is your dark horse?
I'm going to stay in the Pac-12, go with Washington. They've got the nation's #1 pass offense, the nation's best quarterback and passer rating, and Michael Penix coming back. They've been killer in the transfer portal. They just added a 4-star running back, Dylan Johnson from Mississippi State. The defense improved as the season progressed this past year. They got a lot of veteran leadership returning to them this upcoming season, which is going to be huge in the future. I really like Washington. I love their schedule as well and the way it plays out for them. Veteran leadership and a fantastic coach in Kalen DeBoer, who just wins everywhere he goes. I like Washington, man. I really like the way they're built.
So right now, you think that Washington is in a better position than Brad's pick at USC to get a playoff berth?
Yeah, I mean, they tackle #1. They're not afraid to tackle. So that's good. That's a good start, right? I mean, USC needs to toughen up. They just play like, we used to make fun of the Pac-12 for being so soft and just playing 7-on-7 ball. USC's like kind of gone back into this intramural football type of skill set. I don't like that. Washington comes after you. They have played some low-scoring games and then blown some opponents out. Like Cal this past season, they were in a defensive battle and they found a way to win. They can win any number of ways. USC wins by just, let's score 45 points and hope to win. And oh, by the way, sometimes it doesn't work, even against a Tulane team in the freaking Cotton Bowl. You kidding me?
Yeah, let me give you one more team outside the top 10, too, that probably is not going to get much preseason hype. Look, very rarely does Clemson get that under-the-radar label. That's where the Tigers are going to be entering next season with Cade Klubnik at quarterback, a couple D-line guys probably going in the day one of the NFL draft. Dabo Swinney rarely gets to use any sort of bulletin board material. We're disrespected, this and that. Clemson's always, in that upper echelon of the college football pantheon of greatness, but not this season. After finishing 11-3, losing to Notre Dame, South Carolina, Tennessee in the bowl game, Clemson doesn't have that, elite mystique anymore. And I think it's a team that if Clemson starts the season in number maybe 12, 13 range, I would lay some money on Clemson as a dark horse potential playoff team, because all the Tigers have to get through in the ACC, as you mentioned, Brandon, early, was FSU, and Clemson's probably another 11-win season.
Brandon,
I don't see it. Clemson's got the worst defense they've had in the last 9 years, allowing 5 yards per play this past season. The defense underperformed. They're losing several starters from that generational defense, as we were calling it, going into this season. And then you look at the offensive receiver. They don't have an elite receiver. They're not hitting the transfer portal. They've lost 10 guys to the transfer portal this year, 11 last year. 7 of the 9 guys who've already picked schools have gone to other Power 5 programs. So it isn't like they're just losing backups to Group of 5 schools. They're losing Power 5 starters to other schools. And yes, Cade Klubnik, better quarterback, but give me a break. Clemson does not have what it takes. They've been going downhill these last 3 years, and Dabo Swinney's stubbornness to not utilize the transfer portal and add kids is going to bite him. I mean, The one addition that they've made, or two additions they've made, are at quarterback. One was former Clemson quarterback Hunter Johnson returning home, and then the great grandson of Bear Bryant, who is just not going to play a single snap at Clemson. They got to change things and do so quickly there. And they haven't done the transfer portal this year, so what makes us think that they're going to be any better next season?
So, Brandon, Clemson has won 7 out of the last 8 ACC championships. So far since you've been on, you said the Alabama dynasty is over, and now Clemson is done in the ACC, and you're just giving the ACC title to Florida State. So are we about to turn the page to a new era of college football where Alabama and Clemson don't matter anymore? Is that what you're saying?
Alabama's going to matter. I'm telling you, Clemson's not going to matter in the playoff picture other than the ACC championship picture until like the last 3 weeks of the season or whenever they play Florida State. I don't like the way they've been building that roster the last 2 to 3 years. Alabama's always going to kind of be there, but next season, not so certain because they have to replace so many guys and then break in a new quarterback. I don't think it's going to be as easy for Alabama as we've seen over the last 5 or 6 years at quarterback when they transition.
Brad, I'm going to start here with you on this one. What team do we have inside the top 10 right now that you think could disappoint us?
So we have Tennessee just outside the top 10 at number 12, Carl, but I've got Tennessee number 7 on my personal ballot. I was our only analyst at 24/7 Sports to put the Vols inside the top 10, and I have to admit, I'm starting to waver a little bit. I'm not worried about the quarterback position. Joe Milton is an elite talent. I think he's going to be a great succession to Hendon Hooker there under center. But the loss of Alex Golesh as OC to USF job, that's going to be big. Him and Josh Heupel had an excellent relationship, kind of the co-play callers there. Those two really fed off each other. And I think Tennessee's year to make the playoff as a surprise team was this season before, that train wreck happened at South Carolina. But Tennessee's a team that I have right now at number 7, and I have to admit that I'm wavering a bit, like I said, because Tennessee did lose some elite talent.
Mine's Alabama, as I mentioned earlier, replacing Bryce Young, an incredible quarterback. The transition at quarterback is not going to be as smooth as we've seen in the last 5 to 6 years there at Alabama. Is it Ty Simpson? Is it Jalen Milroe? I don't think it's really going to matter. I think there's going to be some early growing pains there. And also, you mentioned Tennessee there, Brad. I really like the offense there. Alex Golesh, yes, play caller, but that's Josh Heupel's system. I think they'll be fine. I think what's going to be interesting is actually is Joe Milton going to be the quarterback mid-season? Do they make a change and go to Nico? That's a big question.
Guys, my team inside the top 10, and we talk about them every year, is Penn State. Every single year is going to be Penn State's year. Every single year we're looking for them to take the next step. I know, Brad, you said that you think that they can be a playoff team this year. I haven't seen it. I haven't seen them consistently be able to challenge Michigan and Ohio State to get out of the Big Ten. And if you can't challenge Michigan and Ohio State, how are you going to challenge the Georgias of the world, the LSUs of the world, the Alabamas of the world? And so I think that Penn State is a team right now that if you're looking for them to go into the playoffs, they're going to have to show me. I'm not going to be able to buy any Penn State stock until I see how they look against Michigan or Ohio State in the regular season, because it always comes down to that, and they always come up small in those moments when they're playing one of those two teams.
I mean, is returning 2 twin 1,000-yard running backs not good enough for you, Carl? And then
No.
Drew Allar, we all know, look, we follow recruiting very closely. 5-star quarterbacks win national titles, or they at least get you to the playoff, right? And Drew Allar is a talented player. We saw in spots this season behind Sean Clifford that, he has what it takes with a howitzer for an arm. I think Penn State's legit. And I'm not sure that Penn State's had the preseason hype in the last couple years Nittany Lions are going to have in 2023. So, if the stock is mid-level right now, Carl, and your mind on Penn State, I'm going to go ahead and buy James Franklin's team.
Well, I would tell you this. You say 5-star quarterbacks win championships and get you there. Well, there's a guy named Stetson Bennett. Maybe you heard of him before, who's got the last 2, and he certainly wasn't a 5-star quarterback. I think that Penn State's got to show that they can stop the run game. How many yards did Michigan have running the football against Penn State this year? It was 400 plus, if my memory serves me correctly. Blake Corum is returning also. Sharon Moore, the offensive line coach at Michigan, I just got to see Penn State be able to do it on the field.
Yeah, Penn State, we got to see them do it against Ohio State and Michigan. More so Michigan to me, being able to match that physicality. I mean, James Franklin is like, we'll get to 10 wins, and then that's about it. That's about our ceiling. Can you bust through the ceiling at Penn State with James Franklin? We haven't seen it yet. We'll see. Drew Aller is a great quarterback, but does that offense open up a little bit more? Do we see more of a vertical passing game as well? Two tremendous running backs, but again, can they match the physicality of a Michigan next season?
Brad, I'm going to come to you on this one first. Who was our transfer portal swing team? Who's the team that, because of the transfer portal recruiting, is going to catapult them into a top-tier team next year?
I think transfer portal at South Carolina is going to make or break Shane Beamer's third season. You know, we saw how much of an impact the portal had on Beamer's second season with Spencer Rattler and Juice Wells, those guys playing really well against Tennessee and Clemson late to finish 8-4 before that, bowl loss to Notre Dame. But South Carolina's had some departures in the portal that are primetime players. Jaheim Bell to FSU, Marshawn Lloyd running back to USC, lost Jordan Burch last week. Oregon's one of the front runners there. You're talking about three premier starters for the Gamecocks on both sides of the ball that are going to be hard to replace. Spencer Rattler has not yet announced his NFL draft decision. If he returns, I think South Carolina adds a couple more players out of the portal on offense because Spencer Rattler is the biggest recruit for this team in 2023. You want to have him returning at quarterback, and you're going to have wideouts in the portal, Carl, that want to play with an NFL quarterback like Spencer Rattler.
Yeah, we talk about the transfer portal maybe helping South Carolina, but they're in this early window about to close, and nothing's really impressed me outside of them getting Trey Knox, the receiver/tight end from Arkansas, who's a legitimate four-star threat and a big-time threat. But he replaces two tight ends that were leaving the program there at South Carolina. They've lost 13 guys in the portal themselves. 4 of them are rated 4 stars in the 24/7 Sports transfer portal. So I'm not seeing where they get better in the transfer portal here, considering it's about to close and it's going to maybe open up back in the spring, and there's not going to be that type of quality player that's going to make them a better team overnight in the transfer portal in May.
So, Brandon, who is your team then?
Yeah, Carl, I know you know the Mizzou program well. Mizzou's top pass rusher just entered the portal. Look for Gamecocks to land him.
Woo! That's heavy right there, Brad. You crystal balling them to the Gamecocks. We're going to check back in. I'm going to hit you later on that off the camera. Brandon, who is your team?
I say it's Auburn because they've done a pretty good job in the first portal window here under Hugh Freeze. They ended up adding 6 offensive linemen either through the portal or through their signing class. 9 additions in the transfer portal right now, and it's quality type of players for them. They've got to add an edge rusher, and they've got to maybe get a quarterback, and they are still actively looking at the portal right now for a quarterback. Guys like Spencer Sanders previously at Oklahoma State, and then there's no telling who might end up in the portal in May at quarterback. And if they wait till then, I think Auburn will be number 1 or number 2 on the list for a lot of these top transfer quarterbacks at that second window, and that could change things for Hugh Freeze and Auburn. Auburn, yes, they had a losing season this year, but they weren't too far off from actually maybe getting to a bowl game. And look at Hugh Freeze's pedigree. He took it over an Ole Miss team in 2012. They had won 2 games, and he made that into a 7-win team, into a bowl game and a bowl win by double digits. Hugh Freeze is going to have Auburn back into the bowl season, and I bet he has an upset or 2 on that schedule next season. And he's done a very good job in the transfer portal, healing up that offensive line, but also adding some key pieces on defense to make them better.
Guys, as we close the college football season in the show today, I want you to understand that you're watching greatness from Kirby Smart. And at 47 years old, with 2 national championships under his belt and potentially another 20 years of coaching in front of him, he could go on a run that ends up making him the greatest coach that college football has ever seen. He could very, very well conceivably catch and pass Nick Saban in national championships. There is a sure thing that I would bet my money on that he would win 4 more national championships, at least in the next 12 years, and possibly as many as 8 over the next 20. We have group of 5 schools We have Power 5 schools, and then somewhere up here, we have Kirby Smart and the University of Georgia as they are playing out of this world, and the transfer portal has not affected them. Guys going to the NFL have not affected them. Losing coaches so far has not affected them. And I think that Kirby Smart has his program in a level that nobody is going to be able to reach. It's him and everybody else. Look for the dynastic run at Georgia to continue. This is College Football Today for Brandon Marcello and Brad Crawford. We hope you had a great season, and we look to see you more in 2023.